Today's stuff we're going to be learning is Bava Kamma Daf Mem Aleph. Today's stuff is sponsored by Ellie Gelman in honor of Becky Portnoy's retirement. Wishing you a healthy, relaxing, and interesting new stage of life. And of course, now you'll have lots more time for the daf. Today's stuff is sponsored by Rabbi Nikki Greninger in loving memory of Rabbi David Ellenson, beloved teacher, rabbi, leader, colleague, friend who brought so much light and love to the world and to the Jewish people, who was a fierce supporter of Israel, dedicated in the core of his neshama to teaching and learning, one of the greatest leaders of our generation. His menschlichkeit was unparalleled. On this Chanukah and Rosh Chodesh, when we desperately need light, may his wisdom, leadership, and enormous heart continue to light our paths. Okay, I'll remind everybody also that we've started our Circle of Friends campaign. Thank you for many of the people who've already joined our Circle of Friends. Again, this is the way that we have our funding for the year to be able to continue our programming. So I'd like to encourage each and every one of you to take the time to consider joining the Circle of Friends. Any donation of any amount is welcome. So if it's too much, so you can give something small. If you'd like to give more, you're also welcome to give more. So thank you in advance, and thank you again to all those who've already joined. Okay, we will get started with our daf now. We ended with this shor ha'itzdadin, and we saw, right, it's a very fascinating topic, how we treat a shor who basically is forced by people to be goring other people and possibly even killing them. But this is definitely not the thing the halacha encourages. There's tsar ba'alei chayim, right? It's misuse of animals, causing unnecessary pain to animals, also to humans. I mean, the whole concept of bullfights is antithetical to Judaism. But on the other hand, it existed. So the rabbis relate to it, which is how do we handle a shor that killed someone in, like itzdadin comes from stadium, right? That's from the Greek. That's where the word stadium comes from. So we're talking about a shor that was used for purposes of encouraged by other people to gore. So if that shor kills, it is not liable the death penalty. However, what we did see is that,
what we do realize is that the question becomes here, how do we treat the shor? So number one, it's not punished, it's not killed, but can it be used on the altar? Now, anything we want to put on the altar has to be something that is perfect almost, right? It can't be blemished. It can't be something used for a sin, for something bad. It can't be something someone wanted to use for idol worship, right? All sorts of things. What about this shor? Can it be used or can it not be used? So we have a machlok at Rav and Shmuel. Rav says there's nothing wrong with the shor. The shor was forced to kill. There's nothing wrong. Shmuel says, what do you mean? It killed a person. It doesn't matter whether it had intent or didn't have intent. It was forced by other people or not. It killed a person, and therefore, no way, no how can we allow this animal on the altar. What we did so far is we brought a braita against Shmuel. And basically in this braita, it talked about this distinction between a shor who kills intentionally and unintentionally. And we thought it meant for sacrifice purposes, but then we said, no, that just means for death, which we already saw. There's a distinction between. In the context of that, we're now going to go off on a tangent. It was comparing a shor shenogach to a shor that engaged in bestiality. So we said here, Amar Maro, starting 4 lines from the bottom of Mem Amud Bet, Nogach meshalem et kofer, rovea eno meshalem et kofer. If you gore, you pay the kofer payment. If you engage in bestiality, and now the problem is, and what? And kill someone? What are we talking about here? You do not pay kofer. Kofer is always this ransom payment, we're going to talk about it more today, that gets paid in the event that your shor kills someone. So the Gemara asks, Hechidami, what on earth are we talking about that an animal engaged in bestiality doesn't pay kofer? Ilema, we're now going to say, it doesn't make sense to be talking about this at all. If you're going to say derava v'katla, if it engaged in bestiality, let's say sexually attacked a woman and killed her, mali katla b'karna, mali katla b'revia. Obviously, you're going to pay kofer. What should it make a difference whether the animal killed while they were goring the woman or killed while engaged in bestiality with the woman? The animal attacks a woman, kills her, no matter what, there's going to be a kofer payment. So how can you say there's no kofer? If there was no death and it was just that the animal engaged in a sexual encounter with this woman, well, it's obvious there is no ransom if there's no death. So what are you even talking about? So we're now going to have a difference of opinion between Rava and Abaye about what are they talking about? What's the case? So Abaye gives what I call the creative answer, which is if you want to get to a case where somehow there was a death here, well, we could get to it in a very roundabout way. Amar Abaye lo'olam derava v'lo katla. Really, it engaged in bestiality, did not kill the woman while it was engaging in bestiality. But why are we talking about a ransom payment? What kind of death was there? Well, now, if the woman engaged willingly in a sexual encounter with this sexual relation with this animal, then she will be killed, actually. It's liable to the death penalty. So if the animal, let's say, encouraged this sexual encounter, the woman willingly agreed to it and gets killed by the court, maybe you would think that the owner has to pay kofer, because in the end, the animal basically brought about her death. Now, death by the court, but death in the end. And that's what it's coming to teach you. Ma'udetema, you might have thought, command katladami, it's as if the animal killed her and you would have to pay kofer. Kamma, the braita teaches you, no, you don't have to pay kofer in that case, because it's kind of an indirect way that she got to death. Rava Amar, right? So that's the creative explanation, because it's kind of a creative way to get to the fact that the woman was killed by the court. Rava Amar lo lam de Rava v'kat. Well, no, really, while the animal engaged in bestiality with this woman, he killed the woman. And if you say, well, what's the difference whether he killed her with his horns or he killed her by bestiality? There is a big difference. And this is something we learned before. What's going to be nice about today's daf, by the way, is going to be there's a lot of review of things we've seen before. It's always fun because then you see the sugya a second time or a third time and it penetrates better. Keren kavanato lazik. Hi kavanato lahanat atzmo. There's a difference between killing by Keren and killing in some other way. Killing by Keren is because the animal has intent to damage. So that's why the owner will have to pay the ransom. But in a case where the animal was engaged in bestiality for its own pleasure and wasn't trying to kill the woman, wasn't intending to damage the woman, but in the end she got killed in the process, well, that you won't have to pay kofer for. Now, why didn't Abaye choose this reason? Because why did he have to come up with a more creative? This is actually a kind of more straight and direct approach. There was ravia, there was death. It's just there's a difference between this kind of death and killing through Keren damages. And then again, then you're going to say the ransom payment, according to Rava, is only when you kill someone with Keren type damages, where there's intent to damage. But that's a whole big machloket that we learned on Daf Kaf Daled, which is Kaf Vav. B'mai pligi, what's the root of their machloket? Why does Abaye choose a different explanation? Because he thinks that in this case you would have to pay kofer. Why? That's their machloket. Their machloket is about a case that we saw in Daf Kaf Vav Amud Bet, which was Kaf Vav Amud Aleph. If an animal is walking through your field, okay, so let's go back to Ruth and Naomi. Ruth's animal traipses through Naomi's field and steps on a child and kills the child. Because they took the example of a child because the child's smaller and could more easily get killed by trampling of an animal. Now, the animal was just walking, which was its normal way. It wasn't intending to damage. And yet, right, it killed. So there's a machloket about it that we saw in Daf Kaf Vav, whether the animal was liable for, right, all the issues of the killing, the ransom payment, all that. Is it right? So darsal gabe bechatzar nizak, are you going to be chayav kofer in that case or not? Right? There's a big debate about the kofer payment specifically in a case where it wasn't with intent to damage. La baya mishalem kofer, you would pay the kofer payment because in the end you killed someone. What's the difference? As we said before, what's the difference if you kill by bestiality or you kill by walking or you kill by goring? Doesn't make a difference. You killed a person. Le rava lo mishalem kofer because there was no intent to damage. Without intent to damage, the owner is not liable to pay the ransom payment. Okay, that was all an aside to understand that one line in the braita that really didn't have to do with our topic. Tanya kavatei de Rav. Now going back to this machloket Rav and Shmuel, can you use this animal on the altar? And interestingly, we paskin like Rav that yes, this animal was forced into this, and therefore we don't penalize the animal at all. In other words, not that we don't penalize, but we don't look at the animal any differently than any other animal. It could actually be brought on the altar. And here's a braita to prove it. Shor ha'itzdadin eino chayav mita, v'kasher l'gabei mizbeach mipnei shehu kemeuseh. It's like he was forced to kill, even though in the end he wasn't really forced to kill, but putting the animal in that situation where you're putting them on stage and encouraging them to kill, and then they kill, that's not the animal's fault. And it actually has no, right? The fact that this animal killed a person is no indicator on the animal at all, and therefore the animal can actually be used on the altar, right? Remember, you can't use any kind of blemished animal. You can't use an animal that was stolen. You can't use, right, any kind of animal. You can't use the ones we saw yesterday that was even someone wanted to use it for avodah zarah, right? But yet this animal killed, according to Rav and according to the braita, is actually, right, and it's interesting. It's almost like it's blaming the people who run these bullfights as it's your fault and not the animal and the animal's owner. Right? There's an assumption that the animal's owner is not the one who is the one running the bullfight, who should have some level of responsibility in what's going on here. Okay, moving on to the next Mishnah. Before we read the next Mishnah, I want to read the verses in the Torah again that we've seen before, but we'll see again. But let's look at them. We're in chapter 21 of Sefer Shemot, and we have all the psukim about an animal who kills a person. So ki yigach, we start with shor tam, because we always start with shor tam. That's the first, because the animal hasn't yet been proven to be a dangerous animal. Ki yigach shor et ish o et isha. If a shor attacks, gores a man or a woman, doesn't make a difference, vamet, and they die, sakol yisakel shor, the shor gets stoned. Below yachel b'saro, pay close attention because we're going to darshan all these parts. Lo yachel b'saro, you do not eat the flesh of this animal. You can't eat the meat of the animal. Ubala shol naki, and the owner is clean. Okay, now what does that mean? Well, it seems to mean the pshat is, as compared to the next pasuk, where gam ba'alav yumat, the owner should get the death penalty. Right here, the owner goes scot-free. Basically, no payment, no kofer. However, we're going to darshan all these sections of the pasuk, what it means, lo yachel b'saro, ba'ala shor naki, all that we're going to have to question. Okay, the first big question is, if you stone the animal wasn't slaughtered, so of course you can't eat the meat. So why is it telling you can't eat the meat? And you might remember we had a whole long sugya in Kiddushin on Daf Nun Vav Amud Bet, specifically talking about this, and the whole sugya we saw there, we're going to see again here, which is why they come up in Kiddushin. Because in Kiddushin, there was a Mishnah that said, if you betroth a woman with something that you're not allowed to benefit from, one of the examples was the shor haniskal, this shor that got stoned for killing a person, you can't get any benefit from, and we're going to see where we learn that from the psukim and what we do with all these different phrases in the pasuk. We're going to see a bunch of different interpretations. The next pasuk is, im shor nagachu mitmol shel shom, if he had already gored a bunch of times, vihu abba ba'alav, and they warned the owner, v'lo yishmerenu, and the owner still didn't watch the shor, v'hemit isha isha, again, and kills a man or a woman, hashor yisakel v'gam ba'alav yumat, the shor gets stoned, and the owner dies. But the owner gets killed. But the owner doesn't really get killed, because the next pasuk continues and says, well, you can pay your way out of death in this case, right? As opposed to when we get to murder, there's all this, right? If a man or a woman murders someone, it says there's no ransom payment. Okay, you can't pay your way out of death. But in this case, since you didn't do it with your own hands, im kofer yushat alav, if they put a ransom payment on your head, meaning saying we're going to ask you to pay a ransom, v'natan pidyon nafsho kechol asher yushat alav, you can redeem your soul. We had a whole discussion, right? With what money, your value, the person who was killed's value. Okay, either which way though, as they place upon you, that you pay. O ben yigach, o bat yigach. Okay, we're going to read through all these psukim because the Mishnah you're going to see goes directly coming right out of these psukim. If a child, male or female child, is the one killed, the same rules will apply. We're going to have to see which same rules. We just talked about a bunch of different rules. And why would it distinguish child or adult? What should it matter if you kill a child or you kill an adult? It's all one and the same. But the Torah says, that's what the Torah is saying, it's all one and the same. Why you might have thought not, we'll get to later in the Gemara, not today. If they attack an eved Knani, then there's no death penalty. You pay 30 shekels. This is one of a number of cases, not too many, where the Torah gives a set amount. Doesn't matter the value of the shor. We're going to see that in a minute in the Mishnah. It's 30 shekel kesef. So let's start our Mishnah. And the Mishnah is going to be a review of basically what we just saw in the verses. Shor shenagachat ha'adam v'met muad mishalem kofer v'tam patur min ha'kofer. So number one, if a shor kills a person and dies, there's a difference, muad or tam. If it's tam, there's no kofer. If it's muad, there is kofer. Both cases, the shor gets killed. And the same is true for a male child or a female child. Okay, that we saw. They're using the exact same words in the pasuk. Nagach eved oama noten shloshim slaim. Ben shu yafem. By the way, I just want to point out the wording. They could have said v'chein katan or ktana. That's the usual word the Gemara uses for a minor. So that's why it's clear here. The Mishnah is just taking the words right out of the Torah, the ben and the bat. Then it says, nagach eved o ama, okay, a slave or a female maidservant. That's again Canaanite or something owned by the Jew, not like a regular, worker in your house. Notem shloshim slaim. You pay 30 slaim. That's what the shkalim are in the Torah, are sela in the time of the Gemara. Ben shu yafeh me'amaleh, ben she'eno yafeh ele dinar chad. You can have a slave that's worth 100, or you can have a slave worth 1 dinar. It doesn't matter. You pay 30 slaim. Okay, there's a set amount. It doesn't matter the value of the shor. Now the Gemara starts off and says, we have a very basic question. How could you ever have a case of a shor muad who kills if the first time the shor kills, we kill the shor? So he's obviously not going to be alive to continue to gore and kill other people and become a shor muad. So how can you possibly have a case of a shor muad who kills a person? Because the assumption is muad for death is not the same as muad for goring. A shor that gored 3 times but didn't kill the person wouldn't be a shor muad that you would have to pay kofer for. Kofer is if the shor killed 3 times. Okay, maybe yes, maybe no. We're going to see. That's what we're assuming right now. So I'm a rabbi. We're going to have 8 answers to this question. Many of them will be rejected, but we're going to try to come up with a case where you could have a shor tam that for some reason, right, that gored and killed, or maybe didn't get killed yet and became a shor muad. Okay, so let's start. I'm a rabbi. 8 answers. The shor went chasing 3 people on 3 different occasions, almost killed them, but why didn't they? Well, somehow the person escaped. Okay, they found a way, they found a hole to climb into, and hid from the shore and managed to escape death. But it was definitely going to kill them, which is obviously the problem here. How do you know it was definitely going to kill them? But, right, it was out to kill, but didn't manage to because the person somehow evaded the shore. Rav Ashi Amar, umdin alav klubhu. Rav Ashi says this goes back to the heaven can wait example. In the end, the shore didn't kill. So just because you assume the shore was going to kill, you can't create a shor muad situation out of an assessment that the shore was likely to have killed these 3 people. That wouldn't make the shor muad. That's not a good answer. But what would be the case? It caused damage to 3 people, and they were sick in bed, okay? Like very, very, unstable, as we would call it nowadays, right? Unstable condition. In the meantime, so it happened to three times. Then it gored a 4th time, and then the people died. So the people died, and then the shor became muad without having been killed yet, because the people only died after the 4th, right? After the 4th, the 4th goring. So now retroactively, the 4th goring became the goring of a shor muad because the shor had killed, just the people hadn't died yet. So when they died, the shor becomes a shor muad. So that's a possible reading. A little bit complicated to think that would happen and unlikely, but possible. Rav Zvi Amal, kigon shaharag shlosha behemot. It killed 3 animals. And that's why it didn't get killed, because it didn't kill people, but it would be muad for killing a person. To which the Gemara says, what? Didn't we learn this? Muad lebehema v'muad la'adam. Just because it gores animals doesn't mean it gores people, which means it's not a shor muad for killing people. So that wouldn't be a good case of a shor muad for people, because if it didn't kill people yet, right, we assume oxes gore other animals, but less likely to gore humans. So that one's rejected. Answer number 4. El Amar Rav Shimi, kigon sharag shlosha avdei kochavim. It killed 3 Gentiles. Now, if you kill a Gentile, remember, you don't get the death penalty. So if you don't get the death penalty, then the shor will still be alive, but it will be muad for killing humans. To which the Gemara gives a strange line, which is hard to understand. Muad lovdei kochavim havi muad Yisrael. But wait, if it's muad for killing Gentiles, it doesn't mean it's muad for killing Jews. Now, what? Does the shor know the difference between Jews and Gentiles? So if you remember, we have the whole thing about Shabbat and weekdays, and they dress differently. So one of the answers given to this question, there's a few answers. I'll give you just one of them. One of them is that Gentiles dress differently than Jews. And therefore, again, there's a different, maybe if the shor is owned by Jews, maybe it's more familiar around Jews, and Gentiles it's less familiar around and might react more to Gentiles, but doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to gore and kill Jews. So therefore, again, hard to understand this, but one possible answer here. So, and again, this is a rejection of the answer and saying it doesn't make sense that would be a case where we would call the shor a muad for Jews. Ela Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. Answer number 5. Kigon sharad shlosha bnei adam treifa. It killed 3 people who were ready to die anyway. Okay, they were going to have died. They had some fatal illness that they were likely to die within the next, treifa, usually when we talk about animals, within the next 12 months, but somehow they were ready to die anyway, which means that when the shor killed them, the shor doesn't get killed because they killed a person that was already kind of dead. They didn't cause the death of someone. Because the person would have died anyway. It goes back to all those sugyot about, someone throwing off the roof and things like that, where if you're killing someone that already would have been killed anyway, you don't get, the shor is not going to get the death penalty here. To which the Gemara says again, bit of a strange again, havamina, muad l'treifa hami muad l'shalem. Just because the gore, now this actually, there's some logic too, which is, or easier logic to find, which is a shor kills a very weak person, right? Assuming a treifa is someone who's going to die, soon they're probably very weak. It's more likely that could happen and not necessarily kill a strong, healthy person. So that doesn't really make sense. That's not a good answer. Ela amarav papa gekata. Now again, we're trying to find a case where the animal killed a person, but didn't get the death penalty. So here's a good example. Every time it killed, before they were able to kill the shor ran away and went to a place where remember, it goes to the marsh where we can't identify because there's a lot of other shores there. And then we lose the shor, and then the shor comes back again and kills, and then runs away. And every time it runs away, so we wanted to kill the shor, but it just didn't happen for technical reasons. Answer number 7. Rabbi Akiva, this is the confusing one. Okay, even the phrase sounds complicated. What does this mean? If, let's say, 2 witnesses come and say your shor gored and killed someone, and then 2 witnesses come, right? And then what happens? 2 witnesses come and say, what are you talking about? We were with you on that day at this place, and you weren't there. You were with us somewhere else. There's no way you could have been there at the same time. And knock out the witnesses. So the shor doesn't get killed because they knocked out the witnesses, because the witnesses were seeming liars, right? Because they got knocked out through hazama. Then it happens again. 2 witnesses come and say, we saw this ox gore someone, time number 2. Come, let's just assume, okay, it'll make it easier for me to give this example, although it doesn't have to be, that the same 2 witnesses who said, we were with you, said the same thing about the next group and say, oh, but we were with you at this and this time, and it can't possibly be. Happens a 3rd time. So basically this shor, there were witnesses 3 times that said the ox gored, but each time they were knocked out by a group of witnesses that said, no way, no how, we were with you. And again, it could be 3 separate sets of witnesses knocked them out. It doesn't really matter. But let's just say it was one group that knocked them out each time. So let's just call them A and B. A and B knock out C and D, E and F, G and H, okay? They knocked out 3 groups of witnesses. So this shor didn't get killed, although there was testimony about it 3 times. And then the ox gores again, a 4th time. And then 2 witnesses come and knock out the A and B witnesses, the ones who knocked out all the others, okay? Or let's say there were 3 sets that knocked out all the others. They knock out all those sets and they say, what are you talking about? You were with those guys on this day, and you were with those guys on that day, and you were with those guys on that day. We were with you on that day somewhere else. So they knock out the ones who are missing, which basically reinstates the original testimony. So now, after the 4th goring, it turns out that we didn't know it, but right, we thought the ox gored, then we said, oh, obviously the ox didn't gore because the witnesses were knocked out. But now the witnesses who knocked out the witnesses were knocked out. It's very complicated to think about. But in the end, all 3 testimonies go back. They're reinstated. And now the ox gored 3 times. And now it gored a 4th time. And the 4th time is now going to be a shor muad because it already gored 3 times. So now the Gemara is going to say, wait, we have a problem with this. And this, again, is a review of something we discussed previously. If the whole idea, remember, the whole question of a muad is it to show that the ox has a track record? So here, yes, it showed the ox has a track record. And by the 4th one, it already had a track record, even though we didn't know it. Then shapir makes sense. But if it's to warn the owner, well, the owner wasn't warned about the first 3, because every time it was warned, well, then you undid the warning and said, oh, it's not true. Your ox didn't gore. So Meimar Amarle, the owner could say, okay, my ox gored a 4th time and you want to make me pay the kofer? But lo hava yadana, I didn't even know that it gored 3 times, because every time you said it gored, you then said it didn't gore. So what do we answer? Now, this is a little different than we understood it last time, because we explained it. What about it's like a case where teacher gets you in trouble and says, you already did it 3 times, and you say, but you never warned me about it. Here, we're going to assume that when we say you need to be warned, it means you need to also know about it. Because it's not like you were talking in class and you were talking in class and misbehaving or whatever it was you were doing in class. In this case, it's your ox gored. Now, you might not know that your ox gored because your ox gored on the street and you never saw it. If you did see it, how are you supposed to know? So they're going to say, in this case, you were there when the ox gored. Now, it's true that Adim became Zomimin and they kind of canceled them out temporarily till they reinstated them. But you know all along because you were right there when the ox gored. So if the witnesses said, this ox gored, and say that we saw the owner was there, and then they get knocked out, but then reinstated, then we know that the owner knows, and therefore the owner should have been more careful the 4th time. And even though we make the whole case all at once, doesn't make a difference because the owner knew. So that's what you would have to say to explain that example. Ravina Amal, the last answer, b'mikirin et ba'al hashor ve'ein mikirin et hashor. This is something we also discussed in the past in the context of the whole discussion about is it to warn the owner or to warn the person. It would be a case where the witnesses knew the owner. They knew that I was the owner of the shor, but they didn't know which shor. They didn't know which one. So they couldn't, because again, what are we trying to find? A case where I have a shor muad, but they didn't kill the shor yet. So my ox gored 3 times and killed, but they testified that one of my shors did it, but they didn't know which one. To which the Gemara asked the same thing we asked last time we brought this up. Might have a little mamba. Well, then I'm not required to watch that shor because no one told me which shor it is. Mishum da'amre, no, because they said to him, Torah nagchani ilach bebekarach, ibayalach leniture kule bakach. You have an ox that gores in your herd. You better make sure to watch that ox. Okay, watch all your oxen because one of them is super dangerous and is killing people, and therefore the responsibility is on me, and therefore you could create a case of shor muad, even though we wouldn't kill the shor because we don't know which shor it is who actually attacked. But then we can, once the shor attacks a 4th time, and we do know which one it is, we can assume he was the one that was attacking all along. Okay, that was all about one question. How could you possibly have a shor muad if the shor tam gets killed, right? Once it gores and kills. So we gave 8 possible examples. I didn't count how many of them we rejected, but we rejected many of them. So now we're going to get to where we get this from, that there's no kofer payment and that the animal's liable to death penalty, and what happens to the animal. We're going to talk about some drashot here. Tanu Rabbanan. So we bring a braita, and this whole sugya was quoted in Kiddushin on Daf Nuvav Amud Bet in the context of the Mishnah about betrothing a woman with this shor haniskal, which you can't do because you can't benefit from. We're going to now learn where do we get the fact that you can't benefit from the shor. So mimash b'shenema sakol yisakel hashor. We're now back to the pasuk. It says the animal gets stoned. Well, basic question. The animal is now dead because it was stoned. It wasn't slaughtered. Would you ever think that you can eat it? Of course you can't eat it. So why does the pasuk say lo? Why would it tell you can't eat the meat if it was killed by stoning? Obviously, you can't eat the meat. You can't ever eat meat of an animal that was killed not by kosher shchita. Right? Stoning is not a kosher method of shchita. So Magid l'cha katuv. What's the words lo yachal b'saro? What is it coming to teach you? She'im shachato la'achar shenigmar dino asur b'achila. Lo yachal b'saro comes to teach you if your animal killed, then it was brought to court, then it was ruled that your animal is an ox that gored. It's now supposed to get the death, the stoned. But before they stone the ox, you go and you slaughter the ox, and you want to eat the meat. No way, no how. Okay, you can't do that. So now they say, okay. So that teaches you can't eat the shor, not even if you slaughter it. But how do we know this halacha that is known to them that you can't benefit from it? Talmud lomar ubala shor naki. Now the words the bala shor naki meant basically that the owner is free. What do we mean, right? Naki means clean, but means like they're free. They don't have what? They don't have the ransom payment. But here they darshan it to say the owner can't benefit. My mashma, how do you get it from those words? Shimon ben Zoma Omer, this is continuation of the braita where they explain the drasha. The way people talk on the street and they say, this guy is clean of his money, meaning he can't benefit from his funds, from his money at all. That's what this means. You can't, he's naki, he's clean, meaning he's cleaned out of his property, his animal. He can't benefit from that animal at all. There's no benefit. Okay? You can't give it to your friend as a gift. You can't give it to, sell it to a Gentile. You can't do anything with it. Now, if you remember, usually an animal that dies without slaughtering, the pasuk tells you that you can benefit from it. You can give it to a kelev. You can sell it to a slave. You can give it as a gift to a ger. Okay, the pasukim talk about this. So, but this case, even though it's a dead animal that normally you can benefit from, you can't benefit from them. And that you learn from the words bala shor naki. Possibly. We're going to see that maybe there's other ways to learn. So now they say, the Gemara starts asking some questions about this braita. Why are you assuming the words don't eat the meat means if you slaughtered it kosher slaughter? Maybe you would say, maybe you think, look, if you did slaughter it, you could eat it. And then what's lo yachel b'saro coming to teach you? Because obviously if it's a nevela, a dead animal, you can't eat it. It's talking about in a case where you stoned the animal, you can't eat the meat, rather than we just said it's before it was stoned and when you slaughtered it. Doesn't mean that. It means after you stoned it. So what's the unique halacha? We already know that it's a nevela. Well, it's coming to teach you da'asur b'hana'ahu, that it's not like a nevela in the sense it's forbidden to benefit. So when it says don't eat, it really means don't benefit. Now, why can we do this? You might remember Da'amar Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says, Amar Rabbi Eliezer, he says in the name of Rabbi Eliezer, Kol makom shneimar lo yochal lo tochal lo tochlu, echad yisor achila v'echad yisor na'a b'mashma. Ad shifarei lecha katuv kedereh sheparei lecha b'nevela, leger b'nitina, lovei kochavim b'michira. The pasuk there said, you can give it to a ger, you can sell it to a Gentile. Only there it said, you can't eat and you can benefit. Because the pasuk specifically said it there, it means you can benefit. But if it doesn't say anything, then don't eat means don't benefit also. So the don't eat here doesn't mean don't eat, because don't eat, we know once you stone it, obviously you can't eat it. It's a nevela. Don't eat means don't benefit, to which the Gemara says, right? And why didn't we say that? And why did we assume don't eat means even if you slaughtered it before it was stoned? So, that would only be, you can say lo yochal means isur hana'ah when lo yochal means don't eat, then it also means and also don't benefit. But in this case, we don't learn don't eat from don't eat. When don't eat, we learn, right? We learn sakol yisakel means don't eat because you stone the animal. It's already not slaughtered. You can't eat. Well, then when the don't eat is not coming to say don't eat, it can't mean don't benefit. Don't eat means don't benefit only when it means don't eat. Also, when it comes to tell you don't eat it, then it means don't eat it and you can't also benefit, unless it tells you otherwise, like in nevela. But here, it's learned somewhere else. So Isa Kadata, now why would it make no sense to say that if don't eat doesn't mean don't eat, then it also doesn't mean don't benefit? Because it should have said don't benefit. If it wants to teach you 2 in 1, you can use the word lo yochal to teach you 2 things: don't eat and don't benefit. But if you want to just teach don't benefit, don't say don't eat, say don't benefit from. So it's very weird that it chooses the word don't eat to say don't benefit. That would be weird. And that's why we're, again, prone to explain the braita. That's why the braita is right in saying don't eat means don't eat even if you slaughtered it kosher slaughter. And this was all to say, why didn't the Gemara choose the option to say don't eat means don't benefit? But they say, inami lo yachel, maybe you could say, lo yachel really means don't benefit. And again, sakol yisakel means don't eat. Lo yachel means don't benefit. We still have a question. Episarol amali. What do you need with the words episarol? What are you going to do with that? In other words, if you don't want to learn the way the braita did, that lo yachel means don't, even if you slaughtered it, still from the words episarol, you would get that halacha, that if you slaughtered it, you still can't eat it. Lamali, because what do you need episaro to teach you? Even though you made it like meat that you slaughtered, right? It's still forbidden because it just could say lo yochal. Why does it say lo yochal episaro? What else are we talking about eating if not the basal? So lo yachel episaro comes to teach you again. Sakol yisakel, don't eat. Lo yachel, don't benefit. This is at least an option, right? We said maybe not, but maybe yes. Then episaro would still teach you the halacha of if you shechted it before it was stoned and you did a kosher shlita, you still can't eat it. So basically, through other type of drasha, we get to the same conclusion as the braita, and we're basically saying that's why we don't say that if you slaughter it, you can actually eat it, and maybe that's not what the verse is talking about. Matkif Mar Zutra. Here Mar Zutra comes with a question. Ema, turning now to Amubet, maybe the shchita, saying if you slaughtered a kosher shchita, you can't benefit or eat. Maybe it's if you check the knife to make sure it was check the stone. People use stones in those days as knives. They would sharpen them, and as long as it has no nicks, a knife with nicks is a problem for shchita in general. So likewise, a stone with nicks, because you might kill the animal before you actually slaughter it. So if you check the stone and slaughter with it, da'avde ke'ein skila. Maybe the pasuk says sakol yisakel. Maybe it means with a stone you kill it. Now normally a stone is throwing, pelting it with stones. But maybe what it means here, and we saw this whole thing in Kiddushin also when we saw the sugya, maybe only then it'll be forbidden to eat. But if you slaughtered it with a knife, maybe it would be okay. Right? Maybe it would be permitted. Ambre, so they say, what kind of distinction are you making? Atu sakin aktiva bo, right? What does it ever say? Shchita is supposed to be done with a knife in the Torah. V'hatnan, it says in the Mishnah. Hashochep magalya betzol bekaneh shlitato kshera. You can use a magal, which is a sickle. You could use a stone. You can use a reed that's very sharp. Any of those things, the shlita is kasher, meaning there's no reason to ever make any distinction between a slaughtering done with a stone and a slaughtering done with a knife. And therefore, once we say slaughtering is going to be a problem, you're not going to be able to eat it. It doesn't matter whether it was done with a stone or any other implement. So now they say the following. Okay. Now we have one other problem with the braita. What did the braita do? So it said lo yachel teaches you even if you slaughtered it, which we had a whole thing. Maybe that's not what we learned from the pasuk. In the end, we say we learned it. Maybe even if you're not going to learn from the word lo yachel, you could learn it from episavo. But once we bring a Rabbi Akiva, we already learned from the words lo yachel that includes also benefiting. So bala shor naki lamali. Why did the braita need to learn it? Or what if we're going to take a different approach from the braita in terms of what words we use to darshan? What are we going to do with the words bala shor naki? Because in the braita it said bala shor naki teaches you can't benefit. Naki min chasav, right? It's as if you're wiped out of your money, you're wiped out of your property as relates to this shor. You can't benefit at all from the shor. You can't get any financial benefit from it. So what are you going to do with bala shor naki then if you learn that same halacha from the words lo yachel, like Rabbi Akiva? To which they say lahana'at ocho. It's to teach you that you can't benefit from the hide of the animal, not just because it's a lo yachel b'saro. That sounds like just the meat you can't benefit from, but maybe you could benefit from the hide. Bala shor naki is explained the same way as the braita. Naki min chasav. You can't benefit from any money of this animal, get any financial benefit, even from the hide of the animal. You might have thought because of the pasuk that maybe it's only the meat. Well, kamash malam bala shor naki. That's why it adds those words. Now they say, but wait. So we now have bala shor naki could be either you can't benefit from the meat at all or anything in the animal, or specifically the hide, because we already know the meat from the other. But there's a third approach, which is lahanach t'nai demafkele lebala shor naki ledrasha achrina. But there's someone who learns bala shor naki. They use those words for something else entirely. Kidbin and lememar kamam, which we're going to see further on, which is going to be in about a minute. Hana'at oro menalahu. So where is that person going to learn hana'at oro? And for this, we're going to get to a very famous line. Nafgalumi et bisaro. Well, it says lo yachel et bisaro. What is the et coming for? If you assume you darshan et, which we're going to talk about right now, et hatafel bisaro, something that is secondary to the meat. What's that? Ma'niu oro. So when it says, it just could have said, lo yachel bisaro, don't eat the meat. It says, lo yachel et bisaro. Et comes to include something additional. That's the hide. So if you use bala shor naki for something else, which we're going to see in a minute what that something else is, then you'll learn et bisaro from here. In the end, we're getting to all the same drashot, all the same conclusions, just learning it from different verses, for different words in the verse. Now they say, Hai Tana et lo darish. Now our braita, which didn't learn it from the words et bisaro and learned it from bala shor naki, so et lo darish. They must not have been of the approach that you darshan every et in the Torah. Kidditanya, here's the famous line, as it says in the braita, and we've seen this before. Shimon Amsoni, va'amrila Nechemia Amsoni, hayad doresh kol etin shebatorah. Okay, he would darshan every et in the Torah. His name was either Shimon or Nechemia the Amsoni. But then he got to the pasuk, you should fear God. And it says the word et there. What could you possibly put as a comparison to fearing God? God is in a different league than anyone else. Et Hashem lokech can't possibly explain it. You should have the fear of someone else like the fear of God. Doesn't make any sense. And he left everything aside. He said, I'm obviously wrong about everything I believed in. I don't think that you can darshan etim anymore. So Amrulo Tamidav, Rebbe, call etim darashta matei alehem. What about all the ets that you darshaned all your life? What are you going to do with them? Amar lahem, like what a waste. Amar lahem, kashem shekibalti sachar la drisha, kach kibalti sachar la prisha. Very famous line, very important to know for anyone who learns Torah or teaches or any of that, right? You got rewarded for everything you learned, even if you made a mistake, and now you're going to get rewarded for admitting your mistake and shifting gears, right? Which is not always easy to do, but that is something you get rewarded for as well. But the story has an end here. Rabbi Akiva v'limed. But then Rabbi Akiva, by the way, came later. Okay, some people say that Shimon or Nehemiah was the teacher of Rabbi Akiva. Later came Rabbi Akiva and taught Et Hashem l'kachatira l'rabot tamidei chachamim. What do you mean? You can infer something else from here. Tamidei chachamim are the representations, right? Talmud scholars are the representatives of God in this world. And therefore, if you fear God, you also have to fear them. And that's a part of fearing God. And that's okay to say. So he came up with an explanation. But still, there were those who said, we don't darshan etim. Okay, now we're going to go, because we mentioned this bala shor naki in a different way to explain it. Now we're going to go to a braita that shows the other interpretation of bala shor naki. So again, it either means don't benefit, or don't benefit from the hide, because don't benefit, we already learned from lo yachal. But here's a different way of darshaning. And the person who darshans it this way learns that you can't benefit from lo yachal, and you can't benefit from the hide from et, the word et. So, Bala shor naki, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, naki mechatzi kofer. You don't have to pay the half a kofer payment. Like there's half damages for short time. You might have thought you pay half of kofer if your short time kills a person. No, you don't have to pay anything. That's what Bala shor naki, and that's, by the way, the simple reading. Because Bala shor naki, as opposed to the gamba alav yumat, and then they pay the kofer. So in the tam case, he's free. He doesn't have to pay anything. In the muad case, he has to pay. So there's no chatzi kofer. Amar lo Rabbi Akiva, v'alohu atzmo em shtalem el migufo. Havi'eu lebeitim v'yishalem lach. Rabbi Akiva says, I don't need a drasha for that. And Tosfot explains this a little better. He says, Tam doesn't say anywhere in the Torah this kofer. So if you're going to say there's a half payment for kofer, you're going to learn it out from half payment of damages. Now, half payment of damages is only paid by the animal itself. What did we say about this animal? It gets stoned, and you can't benefit from it. So Rabbi Akiva says, how would you even think that you could pay kofer, half kofer? You would have to pay from the animal, and the animal is worth zero. So the guy can say, oh, bring the animal to court and pay me from that. But the animal is obviously worth nothing because you can't benefit from the animal. So there is no way to pay it. So you don't even need a drasha to tell me that. To which he says, Amar lo Rabbi Eliezer. Kach, and we're going to have two different versions of what Rabbi Eliezer says. Kach ani be'einecha shedini b'zeh shechayav mita. Of course, if you, like, what do you think? What do you think of me? You think I was talking about when you kill the animal? Of course, if you kill the animal, there's no kofer payment. But the drasha is coming for a case. Ein dini ela keshehimit et ha'adam al pi eid echad. We're going to try to find a case. We're going to have 5 in the end that really break up into kind of 2 sections here, one in this braita, one in the next. It's going to be a case where the shor doesn't get killed for some reason. Either there was only one witness to the killing, which you can't kill a shor based on one witness, right? Eid echad doesn't stand up in court, but it would be enough to say you might have thought you had to pay a half kofer payment. Comes the Torah and says, no, you don't have to. That's the bala shor naki. O al pi ba'alim. Or I came and admitted that my shor killed, and then I'd be exempt from kofer. That's what bala shor naki is telling me. I don't have to pay half kofer from the animal, because the animal in both those cases will still be alive. Al pi ba'alim, wait, but it's all a knas anyway. Chatzi nezik is knas. Again, we saw a debate. Is it mammon is a knas? If you assume it's knas, then chatzi kofer is going to be knas. And if it's knas, then moda b'knas is patur. Of course, you're not going to have to pay it again. You don't need the drasha to tell you that. Well, kasavar kufer kapara. Well, if you hold that the kofer is kapara as atonement, you might have said maybe, and Rashi says this nicely, in other words, yes, maybe technically moda b'knas is patur, but in the end, you might have said you need atonement, because in the end, your shor killed a person, and maybe we'll make you pay half the kofer in the case where the animal is still in existence, where I came and admitted and they didn't kill my animal. But no, that's why you need the drasha to teach you not. Tani idach, another version of what Rabbi Eliezer's response was. Amar Rabbi Eliezer, Akiva, kachani beinecha shedini b'zeh shchayam mita. You think I was talking about a case where the animal is liable to death penalty? Ein dini ela b'mitkaben la'arog et habema v'harag et ha'adam limitzri, or in some versions linochri, to a Gentile v'harag Yisrael l'nefalim v'harag ben kayama. I was talking about a case where the animal won't get killed because it intended to kill an animal and accidentally, in the end, killed a person. You don't get killed for that. Intended to kill a Gentile but killed a Jew. You won't get killed for that. Lit nifalim, for a non-viable baby, and ended up killing a viable baby. So in all those cases, the animal won't get killed. You might have thought there was a chatzi kofer payment because in the end it killed a person, but no, there is no chatzi kofer payment. That's what Bala shor naki comes to teach you. That's Rabbi Eliezer's answer. So now they want to know, interesting question, you'll see the relevance of it tomorrow. Hey, Amar Beresha. The assumption is Rabbi Eliezer said both those two and those three, right? The kavana issue and the dead that killed Alpi Edechad, or the Balim. Right? So, or the Balim came and admitted. So which one did he say first? So one said he said the mitkaven cases, the wrong intent cases first. One said he said the death cases that he killed either by one witness or he admitted it in court by himself, and there were no witnesses. So why this is relevant, we'll see tomorrow. We'll get to this a little bit more in depth about why it's important which one was said first, what each one's trying to say. Quick review of our daf. So we started with the case of Revia. How could you have Revia? We're even talking about kofer. There is no kofer payment, but why? What case are we talking about where there is no kofer payment? Usually you don't kill when there's bestiality. We have Rav and Abaya and the difference between them, and then we brought a braita that supported Rav that you can actually use an animal, the shor ha'itzdadin, as a sacrifice. Then we brought the cases of a shor who kills, and there's kofer, and there's, and then we said, how could you possibly have a shor muad who kills if the shor's tam is already supposed to get, once he gores once, the shor is already supposed to get killed. We brought 8 answers. Many were rejected. Some stayed. Then we had this braita that brought to us, how do we darshan that whole pasuk? Lo yachel b'saro, bala shor naki. What do we do with all those? What's it coming to teach? Then we suggested that really it's coming to lo yachel b'saro is even if you slaughter it. We tried to suggest maybe not, maybe you would be allowed to, and then they kind of showed the back and forth between the verses about why that couldn't be the case. What are each of the parts of the pasuk teaching you? In the end, we had kind of all the same halachot, but they were learned out in a bunch of different possibilities of derivation. And then from them, we got to the last explanation of what you could do with bala shor naki. Rabbi Eliezer learned to say you don't pay chatzi kofer, to which Rabbi Akiva said, of course you don't pay chatzi kofer, you don't have the animal to pay from, the animal is stoned, to which Rabbi Eliezer suggested a bunch of cases where the animal wouldn't get stoned, and yet you still don't pay chatzi kofer, and that's what bala shor naki is coming to teach you. With that, wish everybody a chodesh tov, Chanukah sameach. Hopefully this month will bring Yeshua v'nechama. See you tomorrow.